Chapter 12. On Wednesday night, Dawn lounged on her bed, reading a battered copy of Huckleberry Finn. They were having a test on it in a couple of weeks, and she wanted to be ready. Of course, that's only if I'm still going to VCGH in a couple of weeks, Dawn thought. She glanced at the calendar hanging on the bulletin board above her desk. Her 13th birthday was marked out in bright pink highlighter. She'd done that when she first got the calendar last fall, before she found out just how important her next birthday really was. Dawn sighed and patted Mr. Marmalade, who was dozing on her pillow. She flipped to the next page in the book but couldn't seem to focus on the words. Her mind kept sliding back to the Z-Corp prank. She'd hoped the East Valley kids would lose interest before it actually happened, but 2 days later they seemed more excited about it than ever. Dawn closed her eyes, thinking over what she'd discussed with the twins. A little toilet paper wouldn't hurt anyone. She and the twins would be there to make sure things didn't go any further than that. The twins had detailed their plan for how to go through the woods and avoid the town completely, and then they could sneak right back out afterward. As for that scary zombie woman, she probably wouldn't dare to attack a whole group of people. No problem. Dawn. Her father shouted from downstairs. Dinner. Dawn opened her eyes and sat up, dog-earing her page. She'd read barely half a chapter, but her homework would have to wait. Her relatives were coming to dinner that night, and Dawn knew she'd better not be late. Coming. She yelled back, or tried to anyway. A wad of phlegm caught in her throat, making her cough and hack. Startled, Mr. Marmalade jumped to his feet. He eyed Dawn warily as she spit excess saliva into her trash can. "It's okay, boy," she choked out, reaching for the cat. But Mr. Marmalade dodged her and jumped off the bed, disappearing through the half-open door. Dawn coughed again, then frowned and glanced at the calendar once more. Her birthday was only 11 days away now, and her symptoms seemed to be getting worse. Was she kidding herself by still holding out hope that nothing would happen on the big day? She already knew she had a 75% chance of turning, and the constant flow of saliva in her mouth seemed to be telling her it was even higher than that. Maybe she should forget about her plans to talk her parents into moving back to their old hometown, and instead focus on figuring out how she was going to deal with her new zombie life. She shuddered. "No," she whispered, heading for the door. As long as there was any hope at all, she was going to stay positive. Or at least try. Downstairs, Dawn found that her relatives had already arrived. Uncle Charlie and Graham were over by the stove watching Dawn's father carve a large roast. Gramps and Dawn's mother were making a salad for the non-zombies in the group. Aunt Kim was peering at the cookbooks on the shelf over the microwave. Everyone was talking and laughing, and the scent of roasted meat mingled with the faint odor of zombies. But Dawn barely glanced at the adults. Her attention went straight to her cousin. Luna was sitting at the kitchen table, with Mr. Marmalade kneading biscuits as he settled into her lap. "Wow," Dawn said, staring at the cat. "He's really gotten used to you guys." Luna smiled up at her. "I bribed him with a piece of beef fat," she said. "Now we're BFFs." Dawn's mother glanced over. "Oh good, you're here," she said to Dawn. "Can you and Luna set the table in the dining room, please? The food will be ready in a sec." "Sure," Dawn said, still staring at her cat. Nobody ever could have guessed he'd been terrified of zombies just a couple of weeks earlier. "No problem, Aunt Angela." Luna scratched Mr. Marmalade under the chin, then gently deposited him on the floor. Dawn led the way into the dining room, which was at the other end of a short hallway that also opened into the pantry and a powder room. Mr. Marmalade wandered along after the two girls, purring loudly. "I'll do silverware and napkins if you do plates and glasses," Luna offered. "Deal." Dawn opened the cabinet and pulled out a stack of plates. She set them out slowly, still thinking about the stupid prank on Z-Corp. She was so distracted that she almost bumped into her cousin, who was arranging flatware beside one of the plates. "Watch where you're going. I'm armed, you know." Luna laughed and held up a butt-tear knife. "Sorry," Dawn muttered. Luna peered at her. "You okay? You look kind of, I don't know, weird." She looked weird. Dawn grimaced, taking in her cousin's green skin. But she immediately felt guilty for that kind of reaction. She could almost hear her parents' voices in her head. "Zombies are people too." "It's nothing," she said quickly, hoping Luna hadn't guessed her guts. "It's just, She glanced toward the kitchen. It was too far away for the adults to hear them talking. These kids at school were talking about sneaking up here and messing around. You know, just because they think Vespertine is weird. She expected her cousin to be upset. Instead, Luna just rolled her eyes. "Yeah, that happens every so often," Luna said. "Usually around Halloween, or when someone down there starts a new crazy rumor about us." She shrugged. "It's no big deal." "It's not." Dawn was surprised. Luna smiled. "It always goes the same way, pretty much. The normals try to sneak in and pull something, but Mrs. Tompkins sees them. Or her dog hears them. He sleeps right by the door and hears everything." She straightened the fork. "They sound the alarm. Most of us get out of sight, and the police send a few non-expressed officers to escort the outsiders out of town." "Oh." Dawn hesitated, wondering if she should tell her cousin the rest. Especially the part about how she and the twins were supposed to help the other kids sneak in through the woods. They wouldn't need to pass Mrs. Tompkins's house that way, which meant she wouldn't know to sound the alarm. But so what? Dawn had been telling herself that the prank wouldn't cause any real harm. She and the twins would be there to make sure of that. What if something went wrong though? What if the East Valley kids peeked in and saw that zombie statue in the Z-Corp lobby? Or the charts in the labs? What if they ran into a real live zombie out for a moonlight stroll? Maybe even that weird, scary zombie woman who kept attacking Dawn. What would happen to Vespertine then? Luna folded a napkin and put it down beside the plate Dawn had just set out. "Anyway, if you're war ride, you could let Mrs. T know to keep an extra close lookout." She laughed. "But she probably won't even need it." Before Dawn could decide whether to say anything else, the sound of footsteps came from the hallway. A moment later, her father burst in, carrying the roast. The rest of the family was right behind him. "Hope you're hungry, girls," Mr. Romero sang out. "There's plenty of meat here for everyone." His gaze fell on Dawn. "Don't worry, kiddo, there's plenty of salad too." For a second, Dawn wasn't sure what he was talking about. Then she remembered she'd told him at the diner that she was thinking of going vegetarian. Now that she got about it, he'd been cooking up tasty vegetarian meals every night since then. She realized he was probably trying to be extra nice and make sure she got a chance to enjoy all her favorite fruits, veggies, and grains before she had to stop eating them forever. "It's okay." Dawn quickly set out the last few glasses. I decided not to go totally vegetarian after all." "Really? Well, that's good, because you wouldn't want to miss this roast." Her father grinned and set it in the middle of the table. Come on everybody, let's eat. On Thursday morning, Dawn didn't have an appetite. She couldn't do much more than stir her cereal around in the bowl while she worried over what to do about the prank. Staring down at the banana slices floating in the milk, she couldn't help noticing they looked like tiny bald zombie heads. Only not green. She shuddered and pushed the bowl away. Her father looked up from his copy of the weekly Vespertine Times. "Your cereal okay, kiddo?" he asked. "I could make French toast or something if you'd rather. You've still got plenty of time." "No, thanks, I'm not that hungry." Dawn was glad her mother had left early for the lab. She loved to quote all the scientific research about breakfast being the most important meal of the day. I think I'll just head over to the Donovans now." She dumped her cereal into the sink, then grabbed her backpack. There was no way she could survive 2 more days of worrying. She needed to talk to someone, and luckily she knew the perfect someone. Someone's actually. If she could get over to the twins' house before their father was ready to leave, maybe they could help her figure out a plan. She could only hope they wouldn't think she was a snitch or a poor sport for wanting to stop the prank. The phone rang, startling her out of her guts. Her dad stood and picked up the old-fashioned landline handset. "Hello," he said. Dawn waved and headed for the door, figuring it was probably her mother. Who else would be calling this early? But her father motioned for her to wait. "Yes, I see," he said into the phone. "No, it's all right, I understand. Thanks for letting us know." He hung up. "Who was that?" Dawn asked. "Mr. Donovan. It seems the twins caught some kind of nasty bug. They won't be going to school today." Her father tossed the paper aside and glanced down at his robe and slippers. "Guess I'll have to drive you down." "Oh, that stinks." Dawn sniffled, automatically sucking back the extra saliva that always seemed to be in her mouth now. She was sorry to hear the twins were sick, but maybe there was a silver lining. It was already Thursday, so Jake and Jane probably wouldn't go to school tomorrow either. The other kids might want to put off the prank until the twins could be there. That would give her more time to figure out what to do. By the time she got home from school that day, Dawn was feeling much more optimistic about things. She'd had no trouble at all convincing the East Valley kids to postpone the prank until the following Friday. Now all she had to do was figure out how to convince Jake and Jane to help her talk them out of it before then. "I'm going next door," she told her dad as he dropped the car keys on the bench in the front hall. "I picked up homework for Jake and Jane in case they're still sick tomorrow." "Okay." Her father headed for the kitchen. "Just make sure you don't catch whatever they've got. No sharing sodas, and definitely no kissing, got it?" He glanced back over his shoulder, winking to show he was kidding around. Dawn smiled quickly and turned away before he could see her cheeks go red. Why had her mind jumped right to Jake when her father mentioned kissing? She pushed that out of her mind as she walked next door. The Donovans' house was quiet, and the curtains were drawn in the front room. Dawn knocked tentatively. It took 3 more knocks before the door finally opened. Mr. Donovan was standing there in sweats and worn-out bedroom slippers, his hair disheveled. His face was always pale, but today it seemed to float like a ghost's against the dark room behind him. "Dawn," he said, seeming vaguely surprised to see her. "Hello." "Hi." Dawn held up the folder of homework she'd brought. "How are the twins?" "I brought their homework so they won't get behind while they're sick." Mr. Donovan smiled faintly. "Thank you, Dawn, that was very thoughtful. But they won't be needing those assignments. Dawn blinked at him. What do you mean? The twins won't be returning to school, Mr. Donovan explained. Not to VCJH, at least. What? Why not? Dawn asked. Mr. Donovan opened his mouth then closed it again. Well, he began. Just tell her, Dad. A bitter voice came from far there inside the darkened house. It sounded raspy but familiar. She'll find out soon anyway. Jake. Dawn called. Is that you? It's me. Jake stepped into view. He was a zombie.